Is on the 23rd principle, which is the necessity for an educated electorate. The founder said that a free people, a free society cannot survive as a republic without a broad program of general education. And really, this whole idea of educating the whole people was relatively new to, in the founder's day. Let me ask you this question. Why doesn't a tyrant want to educate the whole people? Yeah, it's a lot easier to control people if they don't know anything, right? And if they think you're the one that knows everything and whatever you say goes. You educate the people, encourage them to know all the facts, and all of a sudden they're going to know truth, and they're going to know more about what you do. One of the founders said that. We'll read that today. No nation ever attempted to educate the whole people, to raise the level of literacy and education like the founders did, understanding that it was a necessary ingredient for freedom. People must be educated. Could you say then that education and freedom are correlated positively? And that if education slips, what might happen to freedom? It also becomes less and less, or is in danger. And let's talk about the beginning of public education. A lot of people feel like that public education is a relatively new thing, perhaps the last century. But as you see in your material for today, which begins on page 249 at the bottom, John Adams describes the beginnings of public education in Massachusetts clear back in 1647. He says they made an early provision by law that every town consisting of so many families should be always furnished with a grammar school. Turns out to be how many families? Community of 50 families had to have a grammar school. That was the law in Massachusetts. And what were they required to teach? The very basic things. What are basic? What's basic to make one literate? Reading, writing, what else? Arithmetic, mathematics, what do they call it? Do you know what they call it? Ciphering. Where in the world does that come from? What does cipher mean, the word cipher? Do you know what that means? It means zero. So it has to do with numbers, right? Arithmetic, okay. Ciphering, what else? History. Boy, they needed to know about their country, about their rights, needed to know some geography, and there's one other thing that they said they had to know more about, and they taught it in the schools. What was it? Correct. Bible study. That was an integral part of early education in colonial America. Let's go on with Adams' quote. He said they made it a crime for such a town to be destitute of a grammar school master for a few months, and subjected it to heavy penalty. See the requirement there? So that the education of all ranks of people was made the care and expense of the public, at least in the very basics. In a manner, he said, that I believe has been unknown to any other people, ancient or modern. It's kind of a new thing. He says the consequences of these establishments we see and feel every day. Now he's writing this in much later. A native of America who cannot read and write is as rare as a comet or an earthquake. Sometimes we think the literacy rate of today is much higher than it was back then. Apparently what? Not so, at least in New England. A person that can't read or write, that's very rare. It has been observed that we are all of us lawyers, divines, politicians, and philosophers, and I have good authorities to say that all candid foreigners who have passed through this country and conversed freely with all sorts of people here, will allow that they have never seen so much knowledge and civility among the common people in any part of the world. What's he saying? This is incredible. I have foreigners that would come to our shores would say, this is an amazing phenomenon. Never seen it before in any other country. Okay? Liberty, he says, cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people. They have a right, an indisputable, unalienable, indefeasible, divine right to that most dreaded and envied kind of knowledge. I mean, of the characters and conduct of their rulers. Why would knowledge of character and conduct of a ruler be dreaded? Who would it be dreaded by? The ruler. I don't want those people knowing what I'm doing. And so there's an incentive for a tyrant to keep the people what? Uneducated. Isn't that sad? But the founders who wanted to change the whole system and say we're through with tyranny, in order to do that, we've got to educate the people. So in a community of 100 families, they had secondary schools. And what was the purpose of a secondary school? Okay, to go a more advanced studies and to prepare young people to enter what? At least around in Massachusetts, to enter Harvard. These were preparatory schools. That's why some high schools call themselves preparatory schools. Prepare to enter college. And as you heard John Adams say, it was illegal not to have a school. I hope you young people understand that what we're talking about here is basic education. And it's kind of interesting. Let me ask you this question. When do you really learn something? When do you really learn something? When you want to, and when your mind is ready to receive it. How do you know when your mind is ready to receive it? Somebody said it. You ask a question, right? Have you ever heard somebody say in a math class, well, I just want you to show me how to do it, and then I can do it. Or I just want you to show me how to do this problem, and then maybe give me some different figures, and I can do it. What do you think of that? I'm not sure you've really learned, have you? Have you ever been in a situation where you've been at home and you've had the book and nobody else was around and you couldn't figure out this problem? What did you do? You what? You'd go ask somebody else. Well, what else could you do? Perhaps you could go back to the beginning of the chapter that the teacher asked you to read, right? How many of you read chapters in math? Really? Now really. Whole chapters. Look through the chapter, work out the examples as you're going through the chapter. See, most people don't do that. But if you really want to learn, if you really want to get to the next level of learning, where a lot of self-study happens and self-learning happens, and that's the next level, you got to learn to search it out for yourself. And what the founders were saying here, if we can teach the basics of reading, writing, ciphering, history, and hopefully imbue into young people a thirst for more knowledge, then they at some point will pick it up and start learning on their own. They'll read books, they'll study out books. You know, you might have to have some mentoring along the way, but it's because you want it and you ask the questions. See, we've lost a lot of that in education today, haven't we? Just sit down, I'll sit down, you give me an assignment, tell me what to do, tell me what to know, and I'll regurgitate it back on a test. See, that's really not learning. Do you agree with that? And many of the founders were the kind that were self-taught. So Let's talk about, John Adams goes on. Actually, it's John Fiske, who's the historian, as we've talked about. He talks about school boards. On page 251, he describes the school board and their duties. Now, these are local school boards. By the way, who elects the school boards? The city? No. Do you know this? Parents. Parents elect the school board, and usually they are other parents. And the school board is one that makes decisions. Listen, follow through here. He says, the term of service of the members is 3 years, 1/3 being chosen annually. The number of members must therefore be some multiple of 3. The slow change in the membership of the board ensures that the large proportion of the members shall always be familiar with the duties of the place. Now here are the duties. The school committee must visit all the public schools at least once a month and make a report to the town every year. Do you think the school board in this district in our city visits every school once a month and makes a report? No. No, I don't think so. There's so many schools in this district. It is for them to decide what textbooks are to be used. Who chooses the textbooks? Parents. Local parents. Do you realize in some states they actually have state lists from which schools may choose textbooks? In other words, some of that decision is taken out of the parent's hands. Then it says, they examine candidates for the position of teacher and issue certificates to those whom they select. Who selects the teacher and who certifies the teachers? The local school board or the parents. What do you think? Who certifies teachers today? Do you know this? What level of government? No, they'd like to. Federal. State. This is usually all done on a state level. But John Fiske is saying here, in New England, they did this on the very local level. You had parents involved in choosing the material their children would study, in choosing the teachers, and qualifying them to teach. See, it's all very local, right? So, let's put this up here. Local. They were highly conscientious people. They served for a 3-year term, visited all the schools once a month, made a report, decided on textbooks, and recruited and certified teachers. What else is there? Well, there's not much, except the funding, of course. And that was also done locally. In other words, what are we saying? Even though it was public education, it was supported very locally. In studying the Founders' Formula, there really is a 3-pronged approach to proper public education. And here they are. 3 guides to a proper educational system. The first one, as we have said, is that it be locally supported. What does that mean? Where does the money come from? It should come from the very local community, from the people who support the school. Most states provide money from the state level. Some schools, many schools, most schools get money from the federal government. What do you think the founders would say about that? No. Why not? Right, because whoever provides the funds provides the rules and the strings, and there's plenty of them. So the founders would say you keep it very local, where parents do the supporting and the controlling. Hence, it's parental directed. Let me ask you this question. Who is the first level of responsibility for your education? Who's responsible to make sure that you have a good education? Who is it? Your parents. Your parents. They're the ones that should be making the decision about what you're taught in school, not some high-level government. Get that? Okay? But parents recognize that particularly as you get into higher levels of education, you might have to be assisted. Parents might have to have some assistance in teaching math or whatever they're not particularly skilled in, so they allow for professionals to assist them. And I always remind my staff here at this school that we are assisting parents. It's kind of interesting. Let me ask you this question. Who do you think our customers are at this school? Who are our customers? Someone in the last class says, well, we are, students. No, not really. Your parents are. We answer directly to them. They give us their opinion. They help us run this school. They decide a lot of things. They decide certain policies, dress code policies, behavior policies, standards and so forth. All that's done in a PTO meeting. And I remind my staff, we work for them. We assist them in helping to educate their young people. Sometimes it gets a little skewed in places where there's bigness and big bureaucracy, and all of a sudden an educator might feel like, hey, I know the best. The parent doesn't know much. I know the best. What's best for your child? Got to be real careful when you start thinking that way. Okay? Did you get those three then? I want you to turn to page 251. Just the next page there.